The Miami Hurricanes 2026 schedule has officially been announced with its 12-game season beginning September 4th at Stanford. It's going to feature 7 home games, 5 road games. Also, too, a little bit different this year with 9 ACC games as the ACC transitions to a 9-game schedule plus a 10th game against a Power 4 opponent. Miami is one of 12 teams in the ACC that will play 9 games, and then 5 other teams will play 8 games in its conference schedule. The reason for this is because with 17 teams, you can't play a 9-game schedule for everybody right now. So that's where it stands. And just for the Hurricanes, coming off this 13-3 season, an appearance in the national championship game, looking at the schedule, the way it shakes out, and I'll go more into it, it definitely feels like, and look, the roster still has to be completed, but it looks like Miami has certainly a chance to win the ACC for the first time. That will be the goal, coming off 2 seasons in a row where they've won at least 10 games. First time they've done this since that 03 season when they had a string of 10-win seasons. And I think they just want to continue its momentum, although they will be losing some key players, but a lot of their teams on this schedule have lost key players as well. But you're hoping the foundation, the things that they were able to do this year, in addition to last year, will help propel them into another successful season here in year number 5 with Mario Cristobal. Just a few notes on the schedule. Miami is going to begin its season with a Thursday, Friday, Thursday schedule. 2 of those games are on the road and at home, to end the season. Miami has 3 straight home games to end the season there in November. Also, too, Miami has 1 bye week this year, and then after the bye, they've got 7 straight games in a row. They did this last year, and I know internally, when they had that 7 straight games, they would have preferred that broken up a little bit with the double byes during the season. But the fact that they went through it last year, I think that should help them this year in terms of a mindset, what to expect, how to approach it, all of those things. It is what it is. But again, 7 straight games to end the season after that bye week in the middle of the year for the Hurricanes. Also, too, to stand out, another thing that stands out to me with the schedule, 12 games once again, but 7 new teams from a year ago, which is great. You get to see new teams. 5 of those are new ACC teams that they did not face last year. Wake Forest, Clemson, North Carolina, Duke, and then ending it with Boston College there. And then in addition to those 2 non-conference games that they didn't see last year in Florida A&M and Central Michigan. So good to see a little bit different of a schedule this year compared to last year with these new teams. There's 3 big name teams on Miami's schedule this year. October 3rd at Clemson, October 17th at home against Florida State. But really all eyes are going to be on that November 7th game at Notre Dame. With everything that transpired this past season with Notre Dame, with the playoff berth, but also Miami playing that thrilling opener last year, winning 27-24 against Notre Dame. It certainly set a lot of things in motion for really both teams. Notre Dame finishes 10-2. They don't play in the bowl game. They don't play in the playoff. And all eyes are going to be on that. One of those big marquee national games, and certainly with the way it looks, with how these teams are supposed to be in 2026. And look, there's plenty of time to discuss it, just some early thoughts. Both of those teams should be in the mix. So the fact that it's November 7th should be a lot of excitement for everybody, there with Miami going to Notre Dame and looking to continue its season there. Certainly it's going to be a difficult task. That's the biggest game. That's going to be the toughest game. And when you look at that schedule, also, too, look, this is a very manageable schedule for Miami. There's not a lot of ACC teams coming back strong from last year. And again, Miami's got its own replacements to make. A lot of key players from this team, from this 2025 team, have moved on. So Miami has its own things that they've got to work out. But when you look at the rest of the schedule, this certainly looks like a manageable schedule. I will say, though, just initial thoughts. Miami went 10-2 and got into the playoff this past season. With the way the schedule looks now, I don't really see this being 10-2 be good enough to get into the playoff again. And if you haven't heard, yes, the College Football Playoff Committee has announced it will remain a 12-team playoff. There was discussion if it would move to a 16, but right now, this upcoming season, it will stay at 12. And again, you're looking at the ACC with the way it is. Now we'll see how it shakes out with some of these non-conference games. but you're not expecting more than one ACC team into the field. And if that's the case, Miami has to have that mindset of really, winning the conference. I think that's got to be the big goal for this year's team. Look, they got in the playoff, made a run. Certainly winning a national title would have been awesome, obviously. But they certainly made steps. That 10-win season that they had 2 years ago, 10-win seasons were hard to come by. So they made a step in year 3 under Mario, year 4 with the playoff run, and now year 5. Let's see if this team can make it to the ACC title game. The official date, the official location has not been announced. But look, Miami has to have that mindset. And I don't think they can afford, just looking at the schedule, thinking about some of these teams, I don't think they can afford 2 losses. So coming out of the gate strong against Stanford, that's certainly what you want to do. And looking at the schedule early on, you certainly have opportunities to build up your season. Stanford's coming in, to its season, coming 4-8 last year. They're going to have a new quarterback, new head coach. Tavita Pritchard's taken over. He was a quarterback coach, a former Stanford quarterback, but he was a quarterback coach with the Washington Commanders this past season, and then Davis Warren looks to be their projected starting quarterback. So new quarterback, and look, Miami's going to be heavily favored, I would assume, in this game. A great chance to make a statement in game 1 at Stanford. And look, Miami typically plays at home, but look, in 2024, Miami started its season on the road as well, picking up that big win at Florida to start that season off. So they're going to certainly be focused once this gets going with spring football just around the corner. As I mentioned earlier, it's not been officially announced, but it's expected to start. Spring ball is expected to start after spring break, which would be that week of March 16th, and then it would conclude the 5 weeks, if you count it out, would conclude April 18th. Again, nothing official has been announced, but that's just looking ahead of what I've been hearing. And the reason for that, again, is because of this late playoff run, the season just ending, and they're kind of pushing things back because typically they would start before spring break. So following the Stanford game, Miami's got its first home game against Florida A&M on Friday, September 10th. Then they go at Wake Forest September 18th. And then September 26th, a home game against Central Michigan. Those are your 4 games. Miami should be 4-0 coming out of the gate. Then they play at Clemson. We'll see what Clemson looks like. They're looking to bounce back, a tough year with 7 wins this past season. They're going to stick with their quarterback. A quarterback that they've had in the program, the Christopher Vecina. And we'll see how things go at Clemson. But certainly that's always been a tough place for teams to play. Part of it's the environment, but certainly Clemson's had really good teams too. So you've got Clemson there in that 5th game of the season, then a bye week, and then Miami hosts Florida State. But just those first 5 games, very manageable for Miami. Now look, it will be challenging with 3 of those 5 on the road. And I kind of glossed over Wake Forest, but Wake Forest did go 9-4 last year. Look, they'll have a new quarterback this year. Looks like it'll be Gio Lopez, the guy that was at North Carolina last season. But Wake Forest won some games last year, just something to pay attention to with its program. Because we're looking at how teams did last year and how they can build on this year. But look, Clemson, 7-6 last year. Florida State, 5-7 a year ago. So again, a very manageable part of the season at the beginning. And really, it should allow Miami to really gain some momentum like we've seen the last 2 seasons with its opponents, with its schedule. Miami was able to get off to good starts at the beginning of the year and then kind of get going there as they prepare for the later part of the year. So after Miami faces Clemson and Florida State, they've got 2 games I think they've got to certainly pay attention to before they play that big game against Notre Dame. And it's against Pittsburgh at home, and Pittsburgh went 8-5 last year. And maybe they're going to be in the running for the ACC championship after Mason Heichel, with what we saw last year out of him. Mason comes back with his second season, if you can build on what he did a year ago. Now, certainly, Miami had a great game against him last season. It really propelled them into the playoff spot there in the finale. But Pitt went 8-5 last year. Again, if Mason can kind of make that jump, that could be a key game. And then even at North Carolina, the game afterwards, Billy Edwards Jr. coming in at quarterback there from Wisconsin, dealt with an injury. But in 2024, he passed for nearly 3,000 yards, 15 touchdown passes there at Maryland. So if he can kind of give a boost to North Carolina, that would be big, and we'll see if North Carolina can get better from its 4-8 season from last year. Again, all these teams, a lot of teams in the ACC on Miami's schedule this year are looking to be better than they were a year ago. Simply put, disappointment, just not winning enough games. I mentioned Clemson and Florida State, obviously, but then they're a program like North Carolina as well. And then the season ends with those 3 home games, as I mentioned, Duke, Virginia Tech, and Boston College. All those teams should deserve its respect. Duke won the ACC last year, going to have that transition at quarterback, obviously with Darian Mensah going to Miami. And then at Virginia Tech, new head coach in James Franklin brings over Ethan Grunkmeyer. They're from quarterback, started 7 games a year ago, so he's familiar with them. And, later on in the season, that Virginia Tech program could be one to watch if James Franklin can get his guys going in year 1 there. And then it ends with Boston College that Saturday after Thanksgiving. But again, looking at this schedule, very manageable. The big game, the huge game against Notre Dame. But look, Miami should be able to have its time. They should be able to have a path at getting the ACC championship. The goal has to be winning the ACC title. I think that's its best path. Looking at the schedule, thinking about the ACC, but I think that's its easiest path to getting a berth in the college football playoff once again. Even though this past year it didn't take that, but I don't think you want to be playing in that game all the time with the ACC. Its reputation, its schedule, its teams. So that will be the goal. Certainly Miami. Obviously, it looks like they can win at least 10 games with this schedule. You don't look at games and think they're going to be overly tough based on how these teams performed last season. But we'll see. A lot still has to be decided. This is very early. Obviously, in the discussion here, but I like Miami's schedule. It's manageable, even though they've got the 7 home games, 5 on the road, but it's 3 early, and then they're able to get on a little bit of a roll there, especially late in the season at home, which you always prefer. Miami's done a really good job with its home games the last 2 years. So definitely, thanks for watching. Let me know what you think about the schedule. Let me know what games you're looking at. Maybe even games that you're excited to see. Maybe teams that you're excited to see. Again, 7 new teams from a year ago on the schedule. So thanks for watching. Have a good rest of the day, and take care.